2 days ago, on December 16th, Russians launched 76 missiles at Ukraine. Good afternoon, this is Henry Keane and our weekly wrap-up on UATV channel explaining complex things in simple words. Valery Zaluzhnyy, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, said on his telegram,
According to preliminary reports, the enemy launched 76 missiles at Ukraine's critical infrastructure targets. Among them, 72 are cruise missiles and 4 guided air-launched missiles from the waters of the Caspian and Black Seas. Valery Zaluzhnyy, commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine.
According to the commander-in-chief, 60 missiles were shot down by the anti-aircraft missile forces of the Ukrainian Air Force and the air defense of the ground forces. The missile terror and the enemy's daring attempts to break through Kyiv's anti-aircraft defenses will not force us to lay down our arms, Zaluzhnyy emphasized. Cruise missiles were launched not only from above the Caspian Sea, but also over the Engels air base in Russia that hosts the strategic bombers which can carry the missiles. Also, the invaders launched sea-based cruise missiles from the Admiral Makarov cruiser, the flagship of Russia's Black Sea Fleet. During the attack, the occupiers also opened fire from S-300 surface-to-air missile systems. About 27 launches of that kind were observed. This is how Russians attacked us. This Sunday, I want to talk a bit more about something else, why they are attacking. This will require a short but illustrious story as an intro. This is Concorde. From January 1976 to October 2003, we had a commercial supersonic passenger plane which could cross Atlantics from New York to London in just 3.5 hours. It was all in one, a symbol of style, comfort, and the miracle of engineering, isn't it not? And then, in 2003, all stopped. The initial development estimate for Concorde was $130 million. All the time from 1976 to 2003, Concorde was generating losses, while the 2 major states of Europe, England and France, nevertheless, continuously invested more into the project, driven by the distant shimmering hope that one fine day it all will pay off. It never happened. Today it takes 7.5 hours, twice as long as Concorde could have done it, to take you over Atlantics. Oh, and it's about $10,000 cheaper. So why did it take so long for the governments of the 2 countries to shut down an apparently unprofitable project? The answer is simple. Managers of the project fell in love with it so deeply that a beloved toy and an engineering marvel, indeed, it has become a symbol of a national dream for them. Nothing bad to it, if only the managers didn't lack an option called loss management. To stop the series of losses, you need to have the will to admit you are losing. And how can you do that when the dream is just so damn irresistible? The managers, having so much money already invested, were reluctant to believe it was all in vain. So they invested more and more. During the course of 27 years, the initial $130 million of investments turned into $3 billion of losses. Well, it is quite hard to give up even on a usual everyday dream, let alone a national one. And everyone has a dream of our own. Putin's dream is to kill us all, to destroy Ukraine, to enslave it, break its very backbone, the national spirit of freedom and defiance. And righteously and beautifully was this dream staged and decorated in his head only 10 months ago.
Решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
I have decided to begin a special military operation. Its goal is to protect people who have been subjected to bullying and genocide by the Kiev regime for 8 years. And for this we will strive for the demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine as well as bringing to justice those who committed numerous bloody crimes against civilians, including citizens of the Russian Federation. At the same time, our plans do not include the occupation of Ukrainian territories. We are not going to impose anything on anyone by force.
Right. The dream of liberating Ukraine from itself in just 3 days. What a splendid, marvelous international show it would be. Putin probably imagined Russian troops flowing as one endless khaki-colored river through the center of Kiev. Beautiful Ukrainian half-naked women burst to happy tears watching how Putin's second, or maybe by then already first, in the world army, marches through a specially built for the occasion triumphal arch. Just as the Concorde dream never happened and never will happen. Severely lacking the loss management option, Putin allows his dream to drag him and his version of Russia deeper and deeper into the abyss. Being a sole manager of his own delusional dream, Putin refuses to acknowledge all this was in vain, and he is losing. For someone who was born and raised by an oppressive, criminal, unjust and long outdated paradigm of Soviet Empire that sanctified the victory at all cost and despised the loss at any excuse, the idea of losing is just unacceptable. This is why missiles fly. And this is why the world should expect the worst. Could it be that the world finally understands it? Could it be why that looming on the international geopolitical horizon of events, the US decision to provide Ukraine with a Patriot air defense system and that long-anticipated rushes out of UN Security Council procedure are suddenly getting a significant boost? Hard to say. And when we don't know something, usually when we don't know something, we're about to ask an expert. Maxim Jigun, politologist and expert in things. We're going to ask him some questions today. Hello, Maxim.
Hello, nice to see you.
It's nice to see you too. Where are you now? What are you doing?
I'm in Ottawa now, having a few meetings with the Ukrainian volunteers and charity organizations that help Ukraine and can provide us more help to winning this war.
Perfect. Thank you for your job. We have a couple of questions for you. The first question is United Nations Security Council and Ukraine. Ukraine has insisted for a long time ago to drive out Russia out of the Security Council. And it wasn't taken too warm-heartedly by the Council, and since last days, the matter has been moving ahead in a haste. Why is that? What is the reason? Do you know it?
You know, Russia is one of top countries that also had a strong position in the UN, and they have this ban right for any bills that the UN wants to pass. So that's why this country always could be very strong of the organization and to ban any decisions that could be passed by the UN regarding Russian aggression in Ukraine and in other countries. So that's why it was hard to lobby any decisions in favor of Ukraine and to help Ukraine in this war. So I hope the situation will be changed, because during last weeks we see that the position of main countries in the world, the Western countries first of all, is changing rapidly, and we see that Western world understands now that Russia is a real threat to the democracy in the world. So it should be stopped in all the places, including the UN and including the European Union, other places where they had a war before.
Right. Well, let me emphasize one thing. My question was exactly what, to your opinion, made the world finally to see the things that we in Ukraine consider quite obvious, that Russia is a major threat to our security in the world and should be stopped for the world's sake. What exactly? What is it a person or is it an event? What do you think as a politologist? what caused that haste that a Security Council finally is ready to drive the Russia out?
Yeah, I think that there are plenty of reasons why the position of the world is changing. And first of all, that's the war in Ukraine. They understand that Russia can destroy the whole cities and the whole country, as an example of Ukraine, and that can be repeated in other countries after Ukraine, in case if Russia was successful in this. So the world understands that the leader of Russian Federation is a bit ill in a mental way, and that he can be a real threat to other countries. The other reason from my point of view is that the world stopped to be afraid of Russia. If we look at international relations just a year ago, we could see that lots of world leaders, they were afraid to make Putin angry or sad, and they just tried to be very they just tried not to be the reason for worrying from a Russian side. But after Ukraine showed that we are not afraid of Russia and we can stop them on all directions, including military way. So then Western leaders understood that Putin is not as strong and as he pretended to be before. The third reason is Russian propaganda. I think that international community now understands that Russian media are not media in official way. It's a propaganda machine that works not only inside of Russia, but also in other countries on international arena. So these pseudo channels should be closed, and they're spreading hate, they are spreading Russian narratives, and that's a big problem. So I think there are lots of factors that made the world to change their mind and to support Ukraine more, and first of all to defend themselves against Russia, because they see what the problem can Russia produce for other countries.
Right, perfectly. Thank you very much for answering. It was a really detailed answer. So these are the other side of the same question. The Patriots missiles, the air defense complexes, that the United States is about, or thank God, hopefully Ukraine will get these Patriots as soon as possible. Is that the reason the same? The world finally begins to understand in 10th month in a row of the criminal aggression of Russian Federation that we are winning and the world is in danger. Is that the reason?
I think that the situation in the U.S. is a bit different from all other world, and there are also a few reasons why the position of the U.S. is changing rapidly regarding the help to Ukraine. First of all, there are some pseudo-experts who say that begging for new weapons from the U.S. by Ukrainian officials because of the aggravation of the situation in the front line is hyperbolized. But the truth is that our partners, including the U.S., they have their own monitoring systems, they have their intelligence, they have satellite images from the front line, so they know the situation is really threatening. So that's one of the reasons why they started to help us more now. The second reason is that according to our main military leader, General Zaluzhnyy, of course, the Minister of Defense, Reznikov and other officials, Russia is planning to mobilize from 200 to 300 Russian soldiers this winter. They continue to accumulate forces on the northern border of Ukraine in Belarus, and from the start of the war, American and European help for Ukraine was extremely important, but now it will become a key factor in this war. And Americans understand this very good. The third reason is that Russia is continuing to target critical infrastructure in Ukraine, and they continue freezing the country and make Ukrainian people survive in the cold. And Zaluzhnyy, in his interview to the Economist, said that we can just imagine what the mood will Ukrainian fighters and defenders have while their children, their daughters and sons and wives and husbands will survive in other cities. For sure, one of the reasons is that we see that Russians want to use a winter time as a period to rest and to prepare a new weapon. So we should not give them this chance to make the plans real. So there are lots of factors, and I think that America now understands Ukraine much better than in the beginning of the war, and they believe in our armed forces more than before. So that's are the reasons why the situation is changing now.
Perfect. Thank you very much for, again, a very detailed answer. Have a nice time in Ottawa. See you soon.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye. We just had online our expert, Maxim Dzegun, politologist and expert in political things. So in 10 months of a war in Ukraine, the world seems to be ready. We are. Putin also seems to be getting ready, whatever he thinks he's getting ready for. Could this Christmas be decisive? This way or the other, looking over my shoulder at the past 10 months, one thing is clear to me. In the days like this, I wouldn't want anyone else to run the country but Zelensky, and our army by anyone else but Zaluzhnyy, and the Ukrainian nation being anything else but it is, a stronghold of dreams backed up by extraordinary willpower, immense desire for victory, and without any exaggeration, the worldwide support. Former United States Secretary of State Henry Kissinger proposed a new plan to resolve the military conflict in Ukraine. In an article for the British weekly The Spectator, he again called for peace and the cessation of hostilities and the reinstitution of borders that were before February 24th as the first condition for dialogue. The return of the annexed Crimea to Ukraine, according to Kissinger, can be discussed only afterwards. If a return to the pre-February 24th state is not possible, then Kissinger suggests referendums to be held in particularly disputed territories that have repeatedly changed hands over the centuries. Let us recall that Kissinger proposed his last peace plan in May and said then that Western countries need to put pressure onto Kiev in order to start negotiations with the Kremlin, and this must be done even if Zelensky had to resort to concessions.
Negotiations need to begin in the next 2 months before it creates upheavals and tensions that will not be easily overcome. Ideally, the dividing line should be a return to the status quo ante. Pursuing the war beyond that point would not be about the freedom of Ukraine, but a new war against Russia itself. Henry Kissinger, former US Secretary of State, at a conference at the World Economic Forum in Davos.
We all know what happened next. It was Kiev, or rather the Ukrainian people, who put a pressure onto Russia, making the whole world believe that Ukraine has it both, the right and ability to decide for its own and choose its own ways, without waiting for the piece of advice even for someone who is a peer to the century. Henry Kissinger turns 100 years in 2023. A historian, Christopher Clark, talking about World War I, puts it that Europe's leaders sleepwalked into a conflict which none of them would have entered had they foreseen the world at war's end in 1918. So the main point, according to both Clark, the historian, and Kissinger, the peacemaker, is crystal clear. Never should the European leaders sleepwalk into any war and should avoid it at any cost and at all times. Not only human-instigated wars Henry Kissinger warns us against, but according to him, also artificial intellect targets our fragile order of things and is threatening our lives and the freedom of human input. Autonomous weapons already exist, capable of defining, assessing and targeting their own perceived threats, and thus in a position to start their own war. It is not Skynet killing us, Ukrainians, today, Mr. Kissinger. It is your dear friend, Vladimir Putin, whom you call the great patriot, hosted him at your house in New York for dinner, and who has made you an honorary professor of the Diplomatic Academy of Russia. So, should we be really listening to you every now and then and start negotiations with your friend, the terrorist, the dictator, and the delusional maniac threatening the world with a nuclear destruction simply because he just can't get what he wants badly? Ukraine on the silver platter. Well, what can I say? I am not the one who can oppose you in any way in eloquence, experience, intellect, and wisdom. But I know someone who can. Heartbreak House, a fantasia in the Russian manner, is a play by George Bernard Shaw written in 1919. The play tells the story of a dysfunctional family living in its own delusional realm, and it does a perfect job of depicting Europe at the time. Europe, where, I quote the critics, those to guide Europe to safety failed to do their proper business of political navigation. And so Europe, unable and unwilling to unite and contest the enemy with its eyes wide open, thus unable to use all of its collective might to defend itself from the dangers of dictatorship, this Europe sleepwalked indeed in 2 world wars subsequently. The quote I am about to use now is often misattributed to Albert Einstein. We don't really know if that is the case, but he or she who said it has all of my support and consent. Insanity is doing one thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So maybe the time has come for the world to stop listening to those avoiders of the conflicts. Maybe the time has come to stop exploiting the outdated and numerously discredited principle of avoiding the war at any cost and then anyway sleepwalking into it later on. Maybe it is time to open our eyes and for Europe to finally stop being a zone of comfort for dictators of all sorts and their outdated friends. And maybe the time has finally come for the world to unite and strike back with all its collective might, so hard that the war in Ukraine is not only paused or halted, but won by Ukraine and the world once and for all. So all the dictators of the future would have had a clear message. The world is not sleepwalking anymore. And just maybe a sobering slap in the face of Putin's Russia is exactly what a future, new, free Russia needs most of all to finally get rid of those long outdated imperial paradigm carriers usurping its future. And we are not talking about going nuclear. It's not just me, but General Valery Zaluzhnyy confirms that, if properly armed, even in a conventional way, our armed forces are fully capable to Ukraine Putin without going nuclear. So maybe, dear world, it is time to give us the means of victory if you really do want us to win this war for our mutual sake. Because Henry Kissinger obviously doesn't. Hungary this week blocked the addition of several Russian officials to the EU sanctions list due to its invasion of Ukraine. Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó said. There are 2 Orbáns in the Kingdom of Hungary. One is Prime Minister Viktor Orbán. The other Orbán is the chief advisor to him, Balázs Orbán. The latter Orbán recently said that the government in Hungary is simultaneously in favor of accelerating Ukraine's integration into the European Union while maintaining close ties with Russia. And that's fine. Everyone has his own beliefs. For example, when I was a little boy, I was sure that if my ass has two buttocks, I would surely be able to sit on two chairs at the same time. All my future experience, however, has proven I was quite wrong. Besides, Ukraine is already maintaining very close ties with Russia. After all, we are killing Russian invaders. Could these ties be close enough for any of Orban's? Because if not, we can always figure out something for them so they can try how close our ties with Russia really are. Both Hungarian officials can come over at any time to Ukraine, spend a night in a hotel without power, heating, and water. Then spend a day in a shelter because there are 70 Russian missiles incoming. Then both Orbans could meet our President Zelensky and discuss if these ties with Russia seem close enough for them. Then they can return to Budapest, safe and sound, and keep on saying about Ukraine taken into EU, something like that.
Hopefully, as soon as possible. And member states should put pressure on the Commission to speed up the process. Balázs Orbán, Chief Advisor of Prime Minister of Hungary.
And after that, at the next meeting of EU foreign ministers, any of Orban's just once again oppose the new package of anti-Russian sanctions proposed by the European Commission, like they did many times before. It is not that it would come to us as any surprise. We in Kiev have long noted that both Orban's and Hungary's interests are two quite different and distant things. Instead of using the criminal aggression of Russia against Ukraine in favor of his own country by doing their best to minimize Hungary's future dependence on Putin's oil, as a real patriots would have acted, both Orbans prefer to use their collective buttocks ambivalently, sitting one into Europe's chair and opposing EU decisions with another one that sits comfortably in a chair in Moscow. Someone in both Orban's positions might be feeling quite torn apart. I mean, any professional hypocrite certainly should be aware of that feeling, having his backside torn apart every now and then. I guess it's just an occupational disease for anyone in politics who has to deal with his own conscience and Putin.
We have set ourselves the goal that every year we take a step forward. This concerns cooperation in the sphere of politics and cooperation in the sphere of economy. If I look back, I must say that there have been more successful and less successful years. There were years when we took a small step forward. There were years when we rushed very forward. This year belongs to the later category.
So, when we say that the times are hard nowadays, indeed they are. But every cloud has a silver lining. These days it is quite easy to distinguish someone who is a friend from someone who only seems one. It was Henry Keane explaining complex things in simple words for you on UATV channel. Stay safe and tuned for more.